Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along to this very short webinar. It's a chance for Q&A, and this is Mr. Barton, the Deputy Head Teacher at Jewellery Quarter Academy. Just want to say thank you for your support over the course of the last couple of days and few weeks. It's been quite a challenging time, as I'm sure you've seen. We are ready, and we will give you a bit of an update via letter shortly with regards to our approaches to rapid asymptomatic testing. Earlier on today, we sent out some information about what the government have shared, which are the frequently asked questions that parents and carers might have with regards to schools' approaches to testing for COVID-19, and also as well the data protection issues around that. What we're going to do this evening is just go through a very short presentation that I'm going to lead. If our operations manager and JQA test team leader, Miss Hibbs, is joining us, she will chip in with different bits and pieces. Just to say, we are working hugely around the clock in order to try and make sure that we've got the testing systems right, and I'll talk more about that shortly. And the letter that Mr. Williams will write to you all very shortly as well will more detail about the systems that will happen at JQA. There will be a chance for Q&A at the end. So I'm going to push ahead and show you a bit more about the Let's start off with them. We're going to offer all asymptomatic, which means students and staff that show no symptoms, the opportunity to have a test at the academy. The test itself is a lateral flow test using a lateral flow device. I'm sure you have seen the leaflet that we're about that we will put out. We'll also have those details, but in the frequently asked questions which we put out earlier, it said a lot about the processes. We are recruiting a workforce which is made up of our own staff and fully trained external staff. So our own staff have been involved in quite extensive training over the course of this week. Ms. Hibbs and other team leaders as well. And we will be offering students and staff 2 lateral flow rapid tests 3 to 5 days apart. So senior team are going to start with this tomorrow morning. We're in over the course of this week. The tests themselves give the results in around 30 minutes. They're quite a simple process, and they're self-administered, as you've seen in the asked questions. We're not going to notify if there is a negative result. So with students, we'd look to notify family if there was a positive result. Anyone with a positive result leaves the academy and takes the PCR test and follows the self-isolation guidelines. I think that is as a result of we've had a previous system where students and staff have had to, if they've been in close contact, I'm sure this has probably affected some of the people in the room. I know that it certainly is something that we dealt with quite a lot in the last week of term, where there was close contacts of someone that's tested positive for COVID-19. We've had to ask groups of students who have been close to that person to isolate for a period of 10 days and then to get they show symptoms. The idea behind this is that it will keep more children in school safely, and so that's a really important aspect of this presentation. Anyone who's identified, as I said, as a close contact with someone who's tested positive can return to the academy if they agree to be tested for 7 days following their last contact with a positive case. We call this serial contact testing. So rather than remaining at home and self-isolating, if you are a close contact of someone that's tested positive, you can come back to the academy, providing you have a series of negative tests over the course of that time. We are going to publish separate guidance once we receive it for students that are SEND students, as we realise that there might be some more challenges around the needs of some of our students to be able to self-administer the test, and obviously our fully trained staff will be on hand to support them with every step of the way. Why might people take a test? A third of individuals who test positive for COVID-19 have no symptoms. We know that some of our the vast, speaking as someone that has tested positive for COVID prior to half term, so on the 28th of October, I was unfortunately quite ill with a positive case. From my experience, I, as a nearly 40-year-old man, had quite strong symptoms, and it's very risky for people the older they get. As you can see, the vaccine has been rolled out to people 80 and above, then 70 and above, and people with underlying health conditions as well. But we know that some of our young people are spreading the virus asymptomatically, so they go without any symptoms. I can speak for my own household, certainly when me and my wife both tested positive with quite heavy, strong symptoms, and were quite ill. And our children showed no symptoms whatsoever. So I think it's important to find out if you are positive and you've had no symptoms, you can help to save lives and protect the NHS. Serial contact testing means that many more students can return to education, as I've said, quite quickly. Tests are safe and they're accurate, nearly up to 100%, in combination with PPE, washing hands regularly, and social distancing. It's another measure that we're putting in, another extensive measure that we're putting in at school to make sure that students and staff can return safely whenever that will be. We're going to put some photographs of what the testing site will look like. We're calling the testing site the Seacole Centre. The government have got their Nightingales, and we thought that an underrepresented hero of the Crimean conflict, well, it wasn't Florence Nightingale, it was Mary Seacole. And so we're calling our testing site the Seacole Centre. It's something that students have been learning about over the course of their personal development sessions this week. It's going to be set up like this. So we'll publish some photographs, but the basic premise is that it's a one-way system with students registering at a desk and with recording desks behind, and then the processing desks as well. So students would be supported to take the test. The test would be, it's almost like a swab that gets put onto solution. If you've seen the frequently asked questions, it gets put into solution once it's swabbed, and I think then it goes into the solution, which is dripped onto the lateral flow device, which gives an indication at the back, and the results are recorded. So there we can see a bit more about how the government have asked us to set the test centre up, and that's essentially the basic process that we're working towards. And like I said, our testing site will be set up by tomorrow morning, and we will share some photographs of our actual site. One of the things that's really important is we need consent from parents and carers to conduct the tests. We're going to send out shortly a link to all parents and carers. You may have seen this in advance already. It's going to be put out more widely with the letter that we share once CORE have given us the final kind of sign off on that letter. We do need consent from parents and carers to conduct the test. Any families that decline to participate in serial contact testing, unfortunately, their child has to follow the usual national guidelines and have to self-isolate. So if there's a case of COVID-19 at the school, we would obviously test, then ensure that students were negative and could remain at school. If we don't have that consent, we have to automatically ask them to self-isolate, which means they miss more school. Which is not an ideal situation for anybody. So a consent process is underway currently for vulnerable key worker children who are in, and our pastoral assistants have been speaking to families of we've got about 10 students in the building at the moment from key worker families and vulnerable students, and we're trying to pursue that consent quite actively, so that they can we can start the process of self-administering the test with them. So they self-swab under the supervision of an appropriate member of staff if they've got consent, and all data handling and any necessary distribution complies with our very rigorous GDPR policy. There is a leaflet coming out on how to do the test. There's a bit of a screenshot here. I'm not sure how well you can see this process, but we'll put it out to you with the letter so that you can see it. And I think it is mentioned in the frequently asked questions as well. It's a very simple process. Students do it themselves, as I've said, and then we record the results, and they get the results within around 30 minutes, which is fantastic. Those of you that have had the PCR test, the longer test, will know that the results can vary in terms of coming back. So our intention is when we do test students to ensure that they are kept in our testing centre just for those 25-30 minutes, and then we can record and share the results rather than going back to class. I think that's the best way to approach it. There's a stigma about that if we put them back in class and then we go and retrieve the people that have had the positive results. I don't think that's an appropriate way to do things. So we want to try and keep it as personal and discreet as much as we possibly can. So we'll send out the leaflet which shows in a bit more detail about how to do the lateral flow test. Now is the time then that we can take some questions. So I'm going to go into the chat and just see what questions we've already had. There we go. Okay. I know that someone called Sana had their hand up. Sana, did you want to ask a question about the processes? If anybody does want to ask a question now, I think the way to do it is either to post it in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up and then I'll ask you to unmute your mic. That's a good way to do it. But I'm happy to take any questions, and if you can't think of any now, and you want to think of one in the middle of the night and you wake up and you think, you know what, I didn't ask that, I had Miss Hibbs's email address is there below, and you can quite easily send her an email. She's the testing coordinator and testing lead at JQA. She's the team leader. She will get back to you. But like I said, we are going to be sending out a letter with information on the leaflet as well. So someone has asked how many tests on average a day do you envision taking? Well, I think that's a good question from Lisa. Lisa, we're not sure of how quickly we can do it yet. It's going to be a trial and error basis. I think we'll know more about that once we've done a few. From speaking to other school leaders that are further ahead in this and have been part of the pilot program, they've said that there's always kinks to iron out. Our intention is to test all students on a weekly basis as much as we can. Obviously, we've got to find a way to be able to do that. Currently, we're looking at Fridays and Mondays for our key worker students. And so we should be able to give more information once we know what our capacity is like. We've also need to make sure that the team is as trained as well as they possibly can be. We also need to make sure that if we're working with volunteers from the community and the community has stepped forward and volunteers have offered to join the testing team. We're not sure yet the answer to that, and I think we'll be able to come back to you with a bit more detail on that certainly soon. I can send you a direct email about that if you would prefer. There's another question from Shema. Do we need to take the test regularly? Well, the idea is yes, we try and test all students as much as we possibly can regularly, just to ensure that people are safe. I think that's something that will be explained when you see the letter. It will tell you more about the processes, how often we're going to do it. So I hope that answers that. What again, Saeed, I think good question. What time of the day will tests happen? Again, it depends. We need to coordinate a schedule that works well for students. Very likely that there will be designated almost timetable slots for year groups. So we will look at that, and we will try and make sure that it's the optimum time. We don't want students to miss key things or break or lunch or anything like that. We're going to think about this very carefully and consider a lot of different factors. You can imagine there's so much to think about. That's a good question. So thank you for that. Trevorn, another good question. I'll come back to that one in a moment. So I just want to answer Valerie's one. What will you do with your findings, and how do we know the severity of the diagnosis? If it's a positive test, we'll notify parents straight away, and the student will be asked to self-isolate. They'll have to then take the full test, which is if any of you have had the full kind of COVID-19, the actual COVID-19 test. Rapid flow test is more of an indication as to whether you're likely to be positive. Full test is the more invasive test that you would do at a testing centre, one of these drive-through ones or the walk-through ones. Or in some cases, we will send students home with the PCR test to do at home and then post off. So in order to answer your question, Valerie, I think in terms of the severity of the diagnosis, you'd have to wait for the original test, for the PCR test to come back, and that's when NHS Test and Trace in contact. So we would, if you're positive at school, we would immediately ask you to self-isolate and get a PCR test or take a PCR test home. Then NHS Test and Trace give you the results of that PCR test. That's when you'll know you tested positive for COVID-19. That answers your question. You've got my email if you want to email me anything extra and specific. So Trevorn, to come to your question, when will this start taking place? It's going to start taking place for key worker and vulnerable students on Friday. We're going to start testing our staff from tomorrow, and the senior team are going to be the first people that take part in that. We don't know, Trevorn, when students are likely to return, and we're still awaiting government guidance on the return for students back to JQA. It will start from when students return back to JQA in large numbers. Yeah, Lisa, good question. Do you have an isolation area for anyone with a positive test? We do, and we have a separate medical room for people that have tested positive. It's very close to the testing centre. And it's a place where we can keep people safely whilst they are either collected or they go home. Okay. Okay, I can see Miss Hibbs has joined the chat now. Miss Hibbs, is there anything that I've missed there from any of the questions that I've had, or any detail that you want to add there? I think that question about the medical room for the positive cases was an important one.
So there was a couple of questions, I think, in regards to how many times we're going to be testing students. That's going to be once a week that we test all students and all staff. As for the positive test, what happens with that is we will send home a student with a PCR test, or they can book one in at a local drive-through centre if they would prefer to do that. And then, we do have an area on site where those students would go ready to be collected straight away. And it would be the usual scenario, what's been happening before Christmas. We would give you a call, explain what's happened, and then the expectation would be that we are either allowed to let the student make their own way home, or they can wait in that area for you to arrange collection. We do have a separate classroom that we will be using that's attached to our testing centre, where students will wait for their 30-minute results to come back, and that's where they can socially distance and wait for those results. And then we have 2 medical rooms in addition to that we would be able to put anybody in if their results was to come back positive, sorry.
I think the key thing that I'll add here is all of this is going to be done very sensitively and carefully and considerately. The training and the work that's gone into this. And Lisa, I just want to say thank you for sharing that quite publicly. The training and the work that's gone into this. Imagine the turnaround that we've done with setting up this testing provision at the school. But the key thing is, and we've got a bit more time now before all students return, and we want to make sure that it's right. And so we are going to start with students, and it's a chance for us to iron out any creases, any issues. And I think coming back to that, one of the original questions was all about how many students do we get through in a day. We've got to iron out these creases, and I think we'll find out the optimum way to do it by making sure that we do it first with staff and students who are workers and the students that are currently on site. So I think there's been some great questions this evening. That question from Maxine is the first test.
Explain how the test will work.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, Maxine, you are correct. So it is the test that tests the nose and the throat. That swab is then put into a solution, and then that solution is put on the lateral device, similar to what Mr. Barton said earlier on. So we would be expecting students to swab their nasal cavity as well as their throat to be able to do the test successfully. There will be a video recording in the room that shows students exactly how to do it. So there's a constant reminder, and each student that's tested will also have a staff member there to assist them as well if they need any help. So yeah, there should be no concerns about students getting tested or not knowing what to do. And there will be a lot of staff in the room that will be able to help and support, as well as the video guidance as well.
I think the key thing from that perspective is those of you that are here now that know us and have known us for a while, you know that everything will be done sensitively and supportively, and our students will be looked after and cared for as much as we possibly can. That's the fundamental base of what we try and do here, I think. Shema, just to answer your point, yeah, you're right. How can you do all the students? It will take a long time. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we're going to rise to together. And with Tibbs leading the testing team and the training that will take place and the logistical kind of smoothness of it all and the thought that's gone into it, it's something that we're going to do. And the reason why we're going to do it is because it's going to enable more students to remain in school. Students have missed out on so much school over the course of the last academic year and the start of this year as well. We had a lot of students that had to self-isolate as a result of being in contact with a positive case, sometimes in the community, sometimes in school. We know that it will help students stay in school more, so we're willing to shoulder that burden if it means that our young people can stay in school more and learn more with us. And so I hope that answers your question, Shema. Are there any other questions that people have got? We've got about 5 more minutes. Yeah, again, if there's something that you just wake up with in the middle of the night, you've got Miss Hibbs's email. Some of you have got my email as well. If you want to contact either of us directly, you're more than welcome to. Miss Hibbs, is there anything that I think from the presentation that you want to add at this stage?
No, I don't think so. I think everything on the presentation is explained. I don't think there's anything that's been left out. I'm just having a little look through the version here. I set up the testing site today, so we will be able to share pictures of that with you very soon. The testing area, it does consist of the registration desk, the recording desk, processing areas. We've got up to 3 testing areas in our test centre at the moment. Our view is that we would like it to go up to 6 eventually, and that should be able to, if we were to test people at the speed that Public Health England would like us to do, 6 testers should be able to get through around 400 students a day. That is the that's the prediction. That's probably not what we're going to try and achieve. But at the moment we've got 3 areas, 3 bays where students are able to go and get tested. So we'll have 3 staff members in there, and pictures will be able to come out very soon for that. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else.
I think just from that perspective, just for people's awareness, we will share pictures of our testing centre. We're certainly not going to be sharing any pictures of students having the test on our social media. You know, we love a bit of social media at JQA, but we're certainly not going to be doing that in the interests of privacy and making sure that that people are respected in that way. There's a couple of questions there. Shadeen, I think, what if my child is not sick? Would they still need to be tested? The answer to that is yes. We're going to aim to test every student. We said at the start of the presentation that many of our young people within our community potentially are asymptomatic spreaders of COVID-19. You'll know that if you that people can test positive for COVID-19 and show no symptoms. And that means that they potentially still could be spreading the virus to people that are elderly and vulnerable and at risk. So the intention is to do that. So thanks. Does that answer your question, Shadeen? I think that's good. It was a really good question. And I want to say thank you to you for choosing JQA for your child for next year as well, because I noticed that today. Saeed, good question. How do we get tested because we're not all in school? So it's going to take place on the return, Saeed. So you'll get clear information about the return back to JQA when we can finally start bringing students back, and obviously that will support you to be safe when you're on site. Peter, there's a good question there about, does the test have any bearing on taking the vaccine? I think it's a fantastic question. The vaccine and the test are completely separate entities. The test is an indication as to whether you have the virus. The vaccine is a preventative measure to stop someone having the virus. So the answer to that is no, it doesn't. They're completely separate entities. Ms. Hibbs, is there anything you think you want to add to that question?
No, I just think it's really important that parents understand that we're not giving the students any sort of injection. We're not giving them the vaccine. What this is to identify if they have the virus in their body at the time of the test. So we're not going to be putting anything in their bodies. It is purely a swab that they do themselves up their nose and in their mouth, and that is it. We're not putting anything in their bodies, no injections, and the vaccine will not be issued by us.
No, certainly not. And like I said, very separate entities. This is just something that we're doing to try and make sure that our community is safe. And I think that the key thing for us now is to ensure that you've given that consent. So we're going to share very shortly the letter and the leaflet, which gives you more information, and also the consent form as well. And hopefully that will allow you to give your consent and get even more information as well as what we've said today. Lisa, I'm assuming current track and trace isolate will continue alongside. Do you mean?
I can answer that one, Jamie. If you
okay,
want.
go for it.
So we still will be track and tracing along with this. So Public Health England have asked that we keep a record of all of our results, and we will also be notifying Public Health England whenever there is a positive case, and we will be still identifying close proximity contacts if someone then comes back with a positive PCR test. Now, it's really important that you understand that we need the PCR test to come back positive and not the lateral test, because the lateral test will come back positive, but then you have to go and get the PCR test after that. Once that test then is then positive, we look at close proximity contacts, and they're the people that then will be put on the 7-day testing regime to make sure they do not have the virus.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms. Hibbs.
And Public Health England will be aware of that step every step of the way.
Thank you for that. There's another question there from Jennifer, which I think we've answered already, which is just about, is the test a one-off? No, it's going to be a regular weekly test. That one from Shadeen, Miss Hibbs, what if I don't consent for my child to be tested? What happens then? Do you want to just take that one?
Yeah. So obviously it is your right not to consent for your child to have the test. However, we're strongly advising that you do, because it's going to help keep everybody safe, and it's going to enable your child to be able to stay in education. If you do refuse and your child is positive, they're only going to find out if they're positive through symptoms. So there is always then the risk that they're asymptomatic and they could be contributing to the spread of the virus. If they were to then come down with symptoms, they would have to isolate, as the usual process before Christmas would have been.
I think looking at it from that perspective, we know that sometimes there's been a case in a class bubble where a student has had symptoms and they've then been kept off school by their family and they've tested positive, and then we've had to quickly ascertain whether other people potentially have been in close contact. What we'd like to do is to rule out whether those people have also got the virus, and so by testing them with the lateral flow test, with the rapid test, we can rule out whether they've got the virus and they can remain in school. Just to answer Saeed's point there, I think, will results be shared with parents? I think that I'm right in saying, Miss Hibbs, isn't it? If it's a positive result, we can't share every result with every parent. It's only if it's a positive result that we're straight on the phone. Is that right, Miss Hibbs?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously, if it's negative, we won't be getting in touch. But if it's positive, then yes, we will be in touch, because we will be asking you to collect your child to take them for the PCR test.
Okay. And Shadeen, I think I'm right in saying that if your child's identified as a contact of a positive case, don't consent for the test, they have to stay at home for a period of 10 days. I think that's right, isn't it, Miss Hibbs?
Yeah, that's right. So they have to go back to the normal self-isolation rules if they do not have consent. One thing I do want to touch on, Mr. Barton, that I don't think has been, is the 7-day regime for the close proximity contact.
Sure.
Now, obviously, we all know that we're only in school 5 days out of the 7, so that pretty much in every scenario there is going to be a weekend that is included within those 7 days. So you will have to self-isolate for those 2 days at the weekend. And it's really important that you still do that, because the testing regime is over 7 days. We can't test you over a weekend, so it's safer for you to just isolate on that particular weekend. Your son or daughter will then be tested on the Monday morning, just as extra security for them and for us. And then that will be the end of their 7-day testing.
Thanks for that, Miss Hibbs. I think Peter's question about online tutoring be available for students if tested, if they're testing positive. Our staff will be ensuring that students on site are taught, and so the vast majority of our staff will be delivering lessons. If students have tested positive, what we've said is for them to follow our curriculum on Ed Lounge. So it's not live lessons, but the curriculum is mirrored with the resources and the activities on the Ed Lounge site. And I think that's the only way that we can currently do that. We can't have a system where staff are delivering in the classroom and then that's also being broadcast on Teams. It's not something that's physically able to be done. And I'm in contact with a lot of schools and a lot of school leaders, and I've not known a school where that's been the case yet. We're obviously reviewing everything to try and make sure our remote learning provision is as good as it can be, and so we're constantly reflecting on that. But the current provision is the Ed Lounge provision for any student that tests positive and remains out of school. And what we've also said is for them to get in touch via Teams with their teachers. Every student has a Microsoft Teams account, and for teachers to be sending work to them to complete, returning it via email as well. So the online live tutoring is that's a bit of bit of a stretch currently. We'll look to see if we can make things happen. But the key thing is, what we're trying to do here is make sure that fewer people test positive. And I think by everyone consenting, by everyone buying into the testing system, we should have a system where fewer and fewer people start to test positive. We've only got a couple of minutes left of this Zoom call now. So I want to say thank you to people for the amazing questions that they've given to us. It's been a really insightful session. I hope that that you've had, and some really good questions. I want to end just by saying a big thank you to Miss Hibbs for taking the lead with the testing centre. I know it's been a lot of work over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I know that the community, I speak for potentially parents and carers here as well, are going to be very grateful for the work that you've put in there. I also want to say a huge thank you to all parents and carers for the work that they did last term to support the school. You'll know that as a school, we were one of the only schools that didn't have to send whole year groups home. We only sent 2 year groups home on the last few days of the last week of term. So that was the students adhering to safety measures over the course of the term. I think that I just want to end by saying that please continue to support us by following the guidance in place from the government. Stay at home, encourage your child to stay at home, isolate as much as you possibly can. If you've got any concerns with remote learning, please come to me and let me know if we can do anything that will support you even further. We've got free school meals that are available to collect on Friday. If you're eligible for that, you're more than welcome to come and visit reception and collect some of those. But the key thing from now is have a look at the letter, have a look at the leaflet, click on the consent form and fill it in. It's a really easy form, and we'll send that out over the course of the next couple of days. There was one last question from Maxine. How do you support the child if the result is positive? The key thing is we've got enough staff around to ensure that we do that. And I think it's a great question to end on, because it shows the supportive nature of JQA. There's so many kind of doting staff around from our support staff. You don't need to worry about that. We will be the person that will support them the most. Thanks everyone for coming. If you've got any more questions, please don't hesitate to email us. So I'm going to end the meeting now just by saying thanks very much. And if you need to get in touch with us, please do. Have a look at the leaflet, have a look at the letter, and have a look at that consent form and fill it in for us.